So this is a session where we traditionally connect to Canada, and I'm going to be handing over to Councillor Norma Moriarty a little while now to run the session for us. But just to say, this is our normal session where we connect into our friends in Canada, and we're doing a little bit of different mode this year that we're going to connect via joint research projects. So you're going to hear from those in a little while. But first, we ran a competition during the year. At least Deirdre Forty couldn't be with us today. She's with Kerry County Council. She's a program manager for the UNESCO project. She did a really great job in running a competition with the secondary school in Carrasavine. And the winner, who's with us, Padre Gavoin, produces a really fabulous video. I'm going to play a little bit. It's too long to play the entire one. I'm going to play a piece of it just to give you a sense of it. But really fabulous way that we capture the whole essence of the transatlantic story. And then I'll just play the video and then I'll hand over to Norma. And just to say, again, thank you to Norma. Great supporter for us. Has been with us for the entire journey. And I always appreciate your support, Norma. So thank you very much for that. So I'll just start that with the video and hopefully this is going to work now. So let's see.
Cyrus W. Field was a wealthy businessman who made his fortune in the paper industry. When introduced to Frederick Gisborne, a telegraph company owner who planned to connect Newfoundland and Nova Scotia, Field was enticed in the idea. Field decided to start a project like no other, one that would change the world forever.
USS Niagara and the HMS Agamemnon arrived at the Irish side of the cable, ready to set off with more than 2,500 nautical miles of telegraph cable between them. It broke on the same day, but was salvaged and repaired, where it broke again over the telegraph plateau and the project was abandoned for the year. Cyrus was ready to try again. He had a new method of laying the cable. Once again, the Niagara and Agamemnon set off. They set off from Plymouth in England and planned to meet in the middle of the Atlantic, where they would splice their cables and go off in separate directions. The ships were better prepared for the task. However, the weather took a turn for the worse. A storm battered the fleet for more than a week. Finally, the Agamemnon arrived at the rendezvous and began laying cable the next day. But after 140 miles, the cable snapped and the project was abandoned. Field managed to get back to Ireland only days after the last cable snapped, where he set off again on his third attempt. Field felt confident that this time he would succeed. On the 4th of August, the Niagara reached Newfoundland, and the Agamemnon reached Kerry the day after. While the cable had failed momentarily, it was working. However, due to inexperience and a lack of knowledge, Whitehouse, the company's electrician, turned up the voltage to combat problems with how they received messages, causing the cable to fail some week after the initial success. Cyrus set off several years after the 1858 failure, this time armed with the massive Great Eastern, the biggest ship of her time. They set off from Valentia Island and steamed towards Newfoundland. However, the cable broke more than halfway out at sea. After many attempts to salvage it, they gave up and marked it. The following year, Cyrus set off, and on the 27th of July, they arrived. They had done it. He had connected the world. Field went back and retrieved the previous year's cable and received a telegram from his wife and family.
As I sat in the electrician's room, a flash came up from the deep, which having crossed to Ireland came back to me in mid-ocean, telling that those so dear to me were well, and following me in their wishes and prayers. This was like a whisper of God from the sea, bidding me keep heart and hope.
Celebrations erupt across the globe and the media reported in great quantity about Cyrus and his team's achievement.
But neither the news of its success, nor its probable effects, can be fully realized yet. In future years, its construction and laying down will form an important chapter in the history of civilization, and the names of the energetic, thoughtful men who have promoted it.
The cable changes life all across the globe, but also for Valentia Island. Along with a new cable station, staff from England arrive on the island. At the height of operation at the station, there was around 200 people working. It was said that their wages were equivalent to a bank manager's at the time. As the Knight of Kerry had predicted, the economy of the island had increased substantially. In the first years, all the operators were outsiders, but in time many locals were trained into the positions. Life in Heart's content also changes, with many of the families who worked there earning well over the average income of the local population. They had access to many new activities, including curling, billiards, and even art classes. Life for the town changed similarly to Valentia, with many people becoming more wealthy and new infrastructure being built. Cyrus and his team paved the way for the modern-day internet, with specially built ships just to lay cable, and more than 1.2 million kilometers of undersea cable around the world. More than 95% of internet traffic goes by subsea cables. The world is now interconnected. More than 160 years since the first transatlantic telegraph cable. People can now send messages across the world in seconds at the touch of a button. Back when the transatlantic cable first started relaying messages, it took around 8 minutes. To send messages was, however, extremely expensive. £1 a word, much more than the annual pay of a mill worker at the time. Life speeds up for people all across the globe, and the cable also plays an important role in the stock market, and trade happens at a new rate. News can now travel across the world. Eventually, the price of sending messages falls, but not for a long time. It was usually only used to announce a death or a birth for the common worker. With the invention of radio, internet, and other fast communication methods, the world is more connected than ever, and we have it all to owe to the transatlantic telegraph cable.
Congratulations, Peter. Well done. Okay. So with that, I will invite Norma to take over the session. Norma.
Thank you, Leonard. I'll try not to hit the wrong buttons here now, okay? But the first order of business is to basically to do the presentation to Peadar Gavon, and to do that presentation we have CE of Kerry County Council of our county, Fergal Reedy, who's going to come up and make the presentation. And it is a beautiful piece. It is a piece of cable itself, prepared by David Howard. And that's actually a unique piece, because I've never seen one quite like that, so which is lovely to see. And congratulations and well done to you on all your hard work, and to your teachers as well. Thank you very much. Let's hope it's kick-starting hope a fortnight of presentations that Cork and Kerry people will be enjoying. We are all one. We want to see you in the hurling, may I say that, provided you come and support us with the football subsequently. Thank you very much, and well done again there. Now, we have people online, which I want to welcome as well. Do we have? Okay. Am I on mute? Perfect. Okay, very good. Thank you. Good man. Eagle-eyed there, Kevin. Good man. I suppose we'll begin our proceedings, because there's a number of things that we're doing here now. We have 2 academic transatlantic projects that we're going to have significant discussion on shortly. But prior to that, we're going to do the diplomacy side of the house. and we want to welcome Irish Ambassador to Canada. I was told I should use the term His Excellency, but we don't do notions in the island, but you have the term is used, so we get away with it. But anyway, John Concannon, I want to welcome John, and who's going to say a few words of welcome for everybody. And again, I wasn't aware, John, that you were involved in the gathering, and that was undoubtedly, as somebody involved in local community activities around Kerry at the time, was a wonderful success. That really was tremendous. So well done. And I also want to welcome, representing Canada, and deputising for Ambassador Dennis King, we have David, I'm saying Kiffin, but it might be Kyfin.
No, that's right. The first, you had it right.
That's it, perfect. So Kiffin, David, you're very welcome. So would you both like to come up and say a few words of greetings, we'll put it like that. Thank you very much. You can? Yeah, there's one there. Yep.
Great. Well, it's John Concannon is my name, and it's a great honour and privilege to be here among so many very, very interesting people and fantastic couple of days of speaking. And in fact, and I represent the Embassy of Ireland in Canada and our consulates in Toronto, Vancouver, and our honorary consuls in Edmonton, Calgary, Nova Scotia, Newfoundland, and Quebec. It's been a really fascinating couple of days and discussions. In fact, tonight, David, I'll be doing a after dinner reflection on the days. So I'll keep some of my powder dry. But just to say, it's such an important initiative, and to pay particular tribute to Leonard and the committee and the foundation. It's really important work that everyone's done, and it's great to be here. And it's great to have travelled back from Canada with James Maloney, who's a super friend to Ireland, and his wife Deirdre, and we look forward to having a fantastic evening with everybody tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Similarly, so I'm here on behalf of the new ambassador of Canada, Dennis King. He's back in his beloved Prince Edward Island just now. The timing couldn't quite work out this year, though I have no doubt whatsoever that he'll be the one delivering this greeting next year. But it did give me the opportunity to come. I've been hearing about it for the 3 years I've been here from the previous ambassador, Nancy Smythe, for whom this was always an annual and very appreciated rendezvous. So similarly, thank you so much, Leonard, for all the work you've put in. I can assure that speaking more broadly from the government of Canada, you have obviously our full support. And I mean very broadly, because it's not really so much the embassy. We're rather a bit player in all of this, but I know that Parks Canada and Heritage Canada and the government of Newfoundland and Labrador and the City of Heart's Content, everybody is really behind supporting the work of the foundation, including the very exciting UNESCO project that is sort of a long-term initiative here. And we really look forward to seeing it come to fruition. And can I just say that it's giving me a lot of thinking as a diplomat, actually, about how our job used to happen well before we were within an instant email's reach of our capitals. Things must have been quite different in the practice of diplomacy. Maybe we had a little more elbow room to go our own way. But so, you know, it's got me a lot thinking about the changes that global telecommunications have brought in my line of work for good, and perhaps occasionally not for so good. But anyways, thank you so much for the program, Leonard. Do you have any further thoughts, John, or shall we wish everybody a good presentation? Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you both very much, and I look forward to your reflections this evening as well, so no pressure at all. So we have Dr. Tig McIntyre from Maynooth University. Okay, so we're the Lily White County is going to take precedence on this occasion, and who's going to be joined by PhD candidate Niamh Power, and they'll introduce their Go Green Next project, and these are projects that are funded under the Horizon 2020, which is the key funding, European funding initiative, which looks at basically research and innovation. It has a very significant budget. It's running from 2021 to 2027. The budget is 95.5 billion in total, so it averages out at about 13 billion per year. And obviously you're trying to make sure you get as much of that to do as your good work as possible. So I'd like to invite you both to introduce us your project and your work. Thank you.
So numbers are really important to us, being scientists and researchers. And actually the most significant number apart from the great number of people here today. So thank you for being here at the end of a very inspiring 2 days. The most significant number we've heard in the last few days is the budget for the next set of Horizon funding, which is 2028 to 2034, is actually 147 billion. So that's actually quite telling because, you know, when we're in crisis, what should we invest in? Should we invest in, you know, the future? And I think that's definitely what's happening in that case. So my name is Dr. Tyke McIntyre. I'm at Maynooth University. I'm PI this project. Previously led a project called Go Green Roots. So Go Green, it's in the name. Actually, Go Green means something. We had great fun and lots of caffeine one day. We came up an acronym for our projects. And it's going outdoors, gathering research evidence on nature and emotion. So it took a lot of thought. There you go. That's perhaps how you get funded as well. So I'll introduce Niamh now. Right.
Hi everyone, I've met a lot of you already. My name is Niamh Power, or Niamh Oak, because there's always more than one Niamh. And I've been involved in this project within the context of my PhD studies for the last year and a half, based down at UCC.
We're going to give you a quick walk through the project by numbers. So I'll let you speak to the challenges.
Yeah, so what we try and do at Go Green Next, is support the implementation of nature-based solutions across 4 pilot cities, one of them being Cork. The other areas are in Klagenfurt in Austria, Päijät-Häme in Finland, and then we take Malta as a whole area because Malta is very small, each with climatic challenges that are quite different but similar sized cities. And in each of those cities there's ambitious plans, particularly in Cork because that's the one I know most about, to implement, you could call them nature-based solutions in a broadest term. When we think nature-based solutions, some might be inclined to jump to SUDs or more traditional conceptions of nature-based solutions. We think of that in a broad sense. So any intervention or program that kind of hits these 3 bases here, like has some climate mitigating purpose that tries to promote biodiversity, as well as promoting urban health and well-being in city environments.
Yeah, and it's a €6 million project. We get additional funding from outside Europe, but actually we're very unique. We're one of the few Horizon Europe projects which have a funded Canadian partner. In this case, it's Carleton University. We also work with US institutions, including Mass Gen Hospital, otherwise known as Harvard, but we won't talk about it today. We'll keep the politics out of it momentarily. It's interesting if you look at the language we use. So we're asked by the EU in this call, so they advertise a call and they say, you've got like 90 days to submit a proposal to say how you can address the challenges here. We're asked to address a challenge about planetary health. And we focus on cities because that's what our previous project was. That's where a lot of our expertise is. And we love some of the cities in Ireland, including Cork and Limerick, which we worked on in our last project. Some of you might be familiar with the Castle Troy Greenway. It's won 2 awards, a national award and an international award. But the language here is telling. Actually, we don't mention climate crisis. We don't talk about catastrophe. In fact, we talk about challenges. The reason is because we think some of the language we use to describe, things we're concerned with is self-defeating. So if we use apocalyptic language which causes anxiety, it can actually disempower people and stop them from acting. And that's because we're taking this view from psychologists. But in this proposal, we've about 45 researchers all around Europe and North America, and most of them are younger than me. That's what I can say. So the muse versus algorithm, it's something of a trend of the conversation over the last 2 days. And it's very, ironic we're talking about, the milestone of Valentia as connecting 2 continents. And at the same time, we're talking about the, challenge and problems we have with, digital connectivity. So in psychology, we say people are tethered to their devices. They can't let go. And there's a big challenge with this, especially for the young. And, the younger generations are an experiment on this. And that's perhaps not fair. And I do take solace with some of wise points made earlier about regulation and control and understanding it. Our view as researchers is we have to explore some of the evidence around this. We need to listen to people's voices because there's great value in hearing the voices today. From local politicians, from business leaders, from all you in the room, there's been amazing knowledge exchange and sharing and inspiration, to be honest. And our view is in cities you need to hear voices. And those voices sometimes are refugees and migrants. You think about this, when you build a park, do you check if that park will meet the needs of the 3,000 or 4,000 new Irish that have landed in your town as a result of the Russian invasion of Ukraine? We don't generally do that, and that's probably something we need to think about. Do we engage with sanctuary runners or the groups that provide sport and physical activity for refugees? And do we treat as equal, those that work in the city who have huge expertise? In our project, we typically don't use academic titles. And the reason is because we have to respect those we work with. For example, we work with many people in Cork City across 3 different departments. And whether they have masters, doctorates, professorships, or PhDs, doesn't matter. They're absolutely amazing at their job. They have mastered their roles, and many of them are able to, help others and train them. And that's all part of a recognition of equality. Because if we're going to solve big problems, and the last panel spoke about that, we have to solve them together through consensus building, and that's perhaps something might resonate around the room. The other piece is data-driven evidence. We think there are uses for tech, there are uses for big data. We know that's useful, but we actually have to make sure that we have consent, we have ethical use of AI. When we create digital personas or use virtual reality, we make sure it's inclusive. And that's part of our thinking, is how do you make sure, if you're going to use digital technologies, that you're accommodating for digital literacy. Because not everybody has the same access to mobile devices, and even if they do, has the same understanding of how to use them or how to use them soundly and ethically, and that's important for us.
So going back to Cork City, which is the city that I'm most involved in, because my small role within the grander ambition of the project is to help to develop a novel way of measuring the impact of some of these interventions, and my role specifically some of the novel psychological factors that are a sign that these things are going well. So in doing that, I've had quite a bit of interaction with Cork City, and we've had some really nice encounters with Cork City Council, linking us in with communities. For the last year and a half, I've spent a lot of my time, not all of my time, getting a lay of the land. Cork people are known for being ambitious. I'm glad to be among them. And I can tell you there's plenty going on in Cork City with regards to, they might not call it as such, but nature-based solutions. One of the projects that I'm most in contact with is a public realm re-enhancement scheme, where they're developing a well-known street, Douglas Street, which would be a very central street in Cork City, pedestrianising a good chunk of that street. Pocket parks are going in at either end, and the real ambition there is to try and get cars off of the street in order to foster, the probability that you'll, stumble upon your neighbour. It used to kind of have this village within a city feel, and that has gone with the increased impact of urbanisation in the area. Something that folks beyond Cork might have heard about is the very ambitious plan or scheme to regenerate the marina area. So along by the marina markets, there's been a big redevelopment of the promenade, which has really fostered a lot of physical activity in the area, and again, getting people together in the community. And I'll speak a little bit more about that later.
Yeah, and the photo you can see here is of on Taoiseach Micheál Martin. It's actually from last June. And in June, Cork signed its commitment to become a mission city. What that means, they said they will go for climate neutrality targets for 2030, and that's not all their targets, but up to 80% climate neutral. And they've very ambitious plans around that. And in fairness, when you have the Taoiseach representing you, you have a chance of getting those plans to be actualised, so that's quite good. But there is a really strong ambition in Cork, and I think this is, comes to the role of cities. So Cork doesn't have a directly elected mayor, Limerick does. And actually, to be honest, we work in other ways with different cities. We worked with Limerick for about 5 years. Cork and Limerick have the strongest ambition, and Cork wins the prize. Cork has been long established a WHO healthy city, and it's really strong links between the educational institutions and the city. So Cork has the potential to achieve that ambition, and that's really, really important for us. We're going to describe how we work across the different pilot sites. We work, as we said, with Malta. Obviously, very different climate, very different challenges, totally car-centric domain of Valletta. How do you deal with air pollution? How do you get people moving when they have more than 35 days a year above 35 Celsius? So they have real challenges, and we don't have that weather yet. I'm not sure how we'd handle it if we did. But we have a mix between what we call citizen-centric approaches, with Niamh is going to talk about, and data-driven approaches.
So yes, I would have had more contact with the citizen-centric approaches myself, because in development of this novel tool, to see what's coming up for people psychologically when they're in these spaces, so that they perceive the health impact most optimally. I've conducted walking interviews myself, which is a method that we actually borrowed from colleagues at University of British Columbia, UBC. Works very well, specifically when the weather is good in the month of May, when I was carrying out my interviews. Then in another part of the project, we do profiling of citizens' attitudes to kind of gauge readiness for engagement with these kind of things. Because I saw, which I'll speak about a little bit later, when I was in Canada, the idea of park culture and being outside in the park is a little bit newer to us than it is elsewhere in Canada specifically. So we kind of want to gauge where people are with respect to these new initiatives going in. And then these citizen champions are kind of, could you call them influencers, I suppose, folks who will kind of be on the ground for us to promote engagement, and as well as that kind of link us in with the community so that we can perhaps, co-create some of these items. I, for example, with the tool that I'm developing, my first step of development was talking to people, what's coming up for them. Second step is this an okay way to measure this? Because we don't want to just dispense surveys that are no fun for people to fill out. We're trying for as much as possible to do things in a different way, and we really do count on our community partners to link us in with the community there, which is working well in Cork for now.
So I'll try to give the other side of that. So one of the ways we help people envision their future city, or how these changes will look, aren't just the kind of architectural sketches that you saw. There's a nice video goes along with the plans for Douglas Street online. Actually, we've created a virtual reality version of that. And in the VR world, you can add in additional nature, additional trees, additional greening. And what happens is, during your VR experience, where you literally walk in place, you get to navigate the street, but you get to see what the impact is on thermal comfort, like the reduced temperature from shade under trees, how quiet it can be. You get to see the changes in noise and air pollution and other factors. So people from a first-person perspective will get to understand the walkability and livability of their streets before we've made drastic changes, which hopefully will be positive. And that's actually something to just reflect on. Sometimes there are changes, unintended consequences occur as a result of regreening cities. We have to try assess this. So we're not simply saying more green is good, it's the right green in the right place. So we're looking at native species, we're looking at creating appropriate tree canopy cover, but avoiding what we call canyon effect, whereby we put too much greenery either side of a traffic route, and that can actually trap the air pollution. So trying to look at these more complex effects at the same time. Just one other piece in terms of the digital side is we're looking at large data. So we've already finished the climate modelling for Cork, and that climate modelling has to account for interactions with increased greening and air pollution. If you go to somewhere like Malta, they actually have a really short window, perhaps 10 or 15 years. If they wait 15 years to put in additional regreening in Valletta, for example, the temperatures will be too high for photosynthesis during the 24-hour cycle. So if you go to really hot areas, you can actually have to act fast. So go back to making mistakes. Our view is fail fast. It's okay to learn and fail in cities. One of the ways we have for doing that is by creating pop-up parks, like the Open Streets campaign Cork City. That allows us to put in temporary green infrastructure, parklets, and let people feel the city with its new vibe and try out these new configurations of nature. So we also do some big data analysis from some apps, which I won't go into. They're from a North American company, and that already poses some challenges, as one could imagine. And we're doing a longitudinal analysis. We're able to access a lot of data on health, and that's one of our main concerns. I'm just going to ask Niamh to speak a little bit about your connectivity with Canada, because we've already mentioned the ironic discussion around hyperconnectivity, and as we're situated here. Can you outline your connectivity and how Canada offered you, an ecosystem for growth?
Yeah, with pleasure. I mean, it's something that I love talking about, having only come back to Ireland last August, in some part due to the project that I was involved in. But I went to Quebec. Is that Canada? Is it the same thing? I suppose that's the controversy. I was there for 7 years. I went there in 2017. I suppose, in retrospect, to bask in the reflected glory of, Quebec's ability to keep its French faced with the English. But I distinctly remember being reminded that, oh yeah, French is a language of the colonizer as well. But anyway, I kind of learned my trade there in research. It ended up going that way, out of an interest in health. I was, a student first at the Department of Psychiatry at McGill University, studying psychiatric epidemiology, so, psychiatric risk factors for disease. Thereafter, I got interested in what was around me, and unfortunately the opioid crisis was very present on the streets of Montreal, as beautiful as they were. That is something you're confronted with in an urban setting in Montreal. So I became involved actually in evaluation of overdose education projects there. But really had many great mentors in Canada, exposure to Canadian data, and really learned my trade there. But aside from that, my arrival in Montreal actually coincided with a municipal election where Projet Montréal, they were a very ambitious in terms of their sustainable urbanism that they wanted to implement across the city. And I saw the benefits of that, actually. And again, something I realized in retrospect, why did I end up in moving to this field? But I really saw how people can get together in green space. I know the weather was a little bit more facilitative of that in Montreal than it would be here in Ireland. But I saw what it was like to be able to move easily around a city, and with regards to, being a little bit further on perhaps in urban planning. I mean, I remember a colleague of mine was doing research on not to get how to get people on bikes full stop, but how to get people on bikes and keep them on bikes through -20 winter conditions. How do we keep our bike lanes good on the ice, So that was, I suppose, looking back, formative for me. It also, I know we're climate hope centric in the project, but it did coincide with a period for me where I became more conscious of environmental issues, and I don't know what I would use the word eco-anxious, but yeah, an increased consciousness around those issues, and wanting to, as a lot of Irish people do, wanting to bring what you've got home, I suppose, and it did coincide with this opportunity that came up with Go Green Next. And someone I was chatting to the other day, they said, oh, I was just in Montreal, you lived there, didn't you? It's lovely. Can you make Cork like Montreal? And I'd really like to see Cork moving in that direction, and any of our city environments in Ireland, because I really did feel the benefits of it myself. And as I said, in this project, I'm involved in seeing what are the psychological factors that come up for people in these spaces. There are more traditional ways of measuring the impact of parks, because that's mainly what I've focused on so far. And those traditional indicators would be, better air quality, decrease in noise buffering. But there are a major thing that comes up is nature connectedness. It might sound a little fluffy for those that are not in psychology, but that is in the literature a factor that is associated with an increase in pro-environmental behaviour. And I suppose it's easy to forget because, you know, talking to people in my qualitative interviews, they're most of the time just pleasant places for people. But if you can put a green space into a city, for example, that fosters a nature connection, nature connectedness has been shown to be associated with more pro-environmental behaviour, and that's ultimately why these re-enhancement schemes, nature-based solutions, are being put in place as part of a wider network, kind of a green network in cities, alongside other priorities, of course, that cities have with, you know, the need to put housing in. But yeah, if I was to say one thing, and if we're to tell stories, it seems that there's been emphasis placed on that in the last 24 hours. It would be that people are aware of the human stamp on these spaces, and they don't necessarily like that so much, although it's more convenient to have a lovely paved surface. There are mixed feelings, and we'll try and capture that in their measurement tools, but there are mixed feelings when you see something with this human stamp on it. There is a preference for perceived wildness, is what you'd call it, strictly in the domain, but these kind of wilder spaces, and yes, maybe in the grander scheme of things, it's hard to see the benefit of them, but even if only to connect folks with nature in that break that they do have when we're talking about, I know, something that came up in the interviews, oh, it gives me a break from technology, it gives me a break from the urban environment, a break from the fast-paced nature of all of that, as well as, I mean, I had someone describe the park as, oh, it's as good as a community centre, even if it's for that, and maybe that, you know, wilder aspect does make it easier to connect in. So I suppose I'll speak up for nature. It's been great to hear young voices, and I'm glad to have the opportunity to speak as a young person here as well. But yeah, I would speak for the wildlife there. There was a few people who want these parks to be wildlife zones, not anthropocentric human zones. So it's striking a balance there, I suppose.
Thank you. Just to conclude, because I may have gone over time. You were just right, but I'd just be clear. No. So actually the data on this is really interesting. So if you create a park or upgrade a park, and that's often what you're doing, you give people access to green space within, 300 meters of where they live, 5 minutes walk. You can save 43,000 lives per year in Europe. The Castletroy Greenway in Limerick is estimated to save 132 lives per year. It costs 1.7 million. The quotient we use, or the estimate used for the value of lives, it's very hard to do that, but let's say the scientific estimates around this are from the US are based at 1 million per year. So just think of the return on investment there. Just think of the reduced cost or burden on healthcare. Just think of the increased quality of life in probably Ireland's third city, Limerick. Imagine if we are able to help regreen Cork over the next 3 years, what impact that could have. And just to conclude, I think, there's one of the reasons we're here, and thanks so much, Leonard, for considering us. What of the futures? Because there's several possible futures. So there's actually a trick to these questions. These are the kind of questions I'd ask my 8-year-old kid, so do forgive me. Where do we look for lessons learned on healthy and sustainable cities? Well, we should look to healthy and sustainable cities, which have good cultural connections with us. And having worked in Scandinavia on projects, that's not the same. They have often quite different social structures, modes of governance. They're highly complex. Maybe we should look to our colleagues across the water, across the transatlantic barrier, and hurdle that. And I think Canada can give us answers. Because you can talk about Montreal, I can talk about Vancouver. I've been to Edmonton at different times of the year. Canadian cities, integral to their being, are having an outdoor space. Now, having wilderness close to you is also good, but that's another thing. And you get to explore some of that here, I'm sure. How do we accelerate the delivery of new evidence about nature and health? Well, we should probably collaborate with colleagues who are used to doing this research. When we Google this, and then use Google Scholar, there's about 50 years worth of research in this area in Canada, and that's often been an inspiration for us. So the answer to question 2 is also Canada. I wonder what the answer to question 3 is. Who should join the EU next to foster stronger transatlantic cooperation? Perhaps I'll leave that one for you to reflect on, given there's diplomats in the room and politicians from both sides of the Atlantic, so we won't force them into answering that. But our current challenge is perhaps a crisis of imagination. We actually have to use our imagination and hope. And that was something we heard yesterday, that our imagination, which is something which is constrained by our tethered use of technology. And going outdoors, feeling the warm breeze as it did at the end of the island today, and the salty air blowing up into your face is something which does inspire you. So hopefully you get to enjoy that as we have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Leonard, and Tadhg and Niamh, thank you both very much for that. When you were speaking there, I recalled one of the discussions we had actually in Kerry County Council about a year and a half ago. We were discussing Shannon LNG, to be honest with you. There had been a group in presenting to us, and there were obviously our issues around that. People, various arguments about transition fuels and so on. But one of the comments that I raised myself at the time was because I had been listening to a programme the evening before that, and I was talking about levels of optimism among young people. And that while traditionally, if you surveyed a group of young people, which would be up to the age of 24, 25, you would have 80, 90% professing a genuine sense of optimism about the future. It's now down at about 35%. That in itself is a crisis, because if we, as was it Henry Ford said it, whether we believe we can or we believe we can't, we're right. So this whole discussion we've had all over the last 2 days, and the constant going back to talk about something optimistic for 2040, we actually have an obligation to keep doing that, and not looking at things as being so huge and so challenging that they're insurmountable, but what can each of us do, and in each of our projects and in each of our communities. And we genuinely do have an obligation to keep reminding people of that, because we have no choice. We have to make it work, and we owe that to ourselves and to future generations. So I was very struck by that, and we do have roles to play. What happens here in these 2 days, it does actually inform us as local politicians. It does inform the way we approach things, and it does keep us going, and it does actually inspire us as well into our work over the next 12 months when you come back and give us another dose of inspiration as well. So pressure on that. So thank you. Our next collaborative project, okay, again, this is Horizon funded, and we have Kevin Fitzgibbon. Kevin is a Cork man, but he's masquerading as a Kerry man in Sneem, or a refugee, one or the other, whichever. He's welcome anyway. He's more than welcome. So Kevin is from MTU, and he's going to be joined online by Dr. Robert Brown from Memorial University in St. John's in Newfoundland. And they've been working on a project, ARCSAR, which is, he's going to discuss all about that and tell us all about it. But again, it's very important and very life-affirming project. And I hope we don't need its results at some point, but we probably will. Gormahagat.
So I'm joined, I think, online by Rob Brown from Memorial University. What I'm going to do is, because we can't see him actually physically on the screen here, I'm just going to ask Rob, if you are online, can you just say hello and confirm that you're hearing us and you can see the shared screen?
Yeah, hi everybody, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Yep. And you can see
okay.
and you can see the shared screen, I hope?
I can, yeah.
Excellent.
It's good on my end.
My goodness, technology is working. Don't jinx it. Okay, well, hello everybody, and I have the great honor of standing between you and dinner. So I'm hoping that I can give you something to, think about. I proposed that to Leonard that we would talk. I would talk about some collaborative research on the theme of the Ireland-Canada sort of connection here at this summer lecture. And after a couple of attempts to identify a topic, we landed on this ARCSAR project, and we're going to give you a talk about here with Rob. The talk has 4 sections. The first one is just an overview and introduction to where I'm coming from, as in the research centre that I'm working in, and likewise from Rob. The second section would be just to give a little bit more of a kind of a personal touch to explain the transatlantic links that Rob and I have on a personal level, because it's not just about working together, as we've been listening. It's also about research, relationships. It's about forming bonds between people, and between people, across the Atlantic, from Ireland to Canada, Canada to Ireland. And then the third section, I'll talk a little bit about our case study, the ArcSAR project, which was Horizon 2020 funded. And then finally, I'll just talk a little bit about the future and the kind of, hopefully, optimistically speaking, the kind of projects that Rob and I and others can hopefully collaborate in on a transatlantic basis. I just want to point out that I found this photograph online, that the background here, and there was a certain L. Hobbs credited as the with the rights. So I just thought I'd better put his name in just in case. So where am I coming from? I'm working with the National Maritime College of Ireland, which is a centre of excellence for maritime training and education, and that relates to all manner of activities, not just for seafarers going to sea, but also supply chain logistics, port operations, all that kind of thing. It has a national remit, but we are technically part of the Munster Technological University, which means we're a bit of an exception. We have a national remit in a regional sort of technological university. We're a joint venture with the Irish Naval Service, which is a bit unique. Certainly when it was formed 20 years ago, it was unique. There may be one or two who have done similarly around the world since. And we've delivered a lot of graduates down through the years in nautical science, marine engineering, electrotechnical officers, and in supply chain and logistics. More significantly in terms of numbers is the number of professional courses that the college has delivered. And what that means is that, if you're, for example, an electrician trained to work with electrical cables and whatnot, that's all well and good, but you can't go to sea until you've passed your professional courses, and the college provides those as well. And we have delivered those to about 22,500 since it was formed. And I lead the research function, the Halpin Research Centre. Why Halpin? Well, it's because of this fella, Robert Halpin. He was the chief engineer on the Great Eastern in 1965-66, laying the first two, and 67, laying the first two transatlantic telegraph cables that endured, that survived, and actually inaugurated the era of transatlantic data communications. He then became the captain on the Great Eastern, and over about a 10-year period laid about 26,000 miles of cable connecting countries all around the world. And we named our research centre in honour of Robert Halpin, who, by the way, was a Wicklow man from Tinakilly. So the Halpin Research Centre then, just as a quick overview, we are by sort of default, we're the RD&I pillar of the Irish Navy, as well as being MTU's research, maritime research lead. And we've done over 40 projects in the period since the centre was formally established in 2012. The value of the projects in total to all partners about 125 million euros from various funding sources, primarily European, but also some national like the SEAI. Memorial University is represented in the next couple of slides, and I'm going to let Rob speak to that. Rob, just tell me when to advance the slide.
Sure thing, will do. Thanks, Kevin. Yeah, and for those who aren't familiar with Memorial University and the Marine Institute, so Memorial is the only university in the province of Newfoundland. We have approximately 20,000 students, depending on the year, from undergrad to master's and PhD students. And within the university, it's a typical full kind of course offerings, university faculties of engineering and medicine and science, humanities and arts, education and so on. Within the university structure, the Marine Institute, where I'm based, is located. So the Marine Institute started life as, I should say also that Memorial was celebrating its 100th year in existence. So it started off just after the First World War, which is the reason why the name is Memorial, because it was developed, at least initially, through contributions to create a memorial to the soldiers lost in the First World War from our province, which at the time was at Minute. Within the university now exists the Marine Institute, and the Marine Institute started life as an independent maritime college. It joined Memorial in 1992, and it sits as a school within the university with kind of a, I'm imagining a similar kind of structure as NMCI has within the Munster Technical University. I'm not sure who confirms this statement, but I'll make it anyway, that the Marine Institute is the most comprehensive centre for education, training, applied research and industrial support for the ocean industries in Canada. The university with the Marine Institute is the portal to the ocean and the Arctic in many ways for the region. And Newfoundland, even though St. John's, where I am, is at the same latitude as Paris, we do not have the Parisian climate. We have lots of Arctic ice that drifts down here in the springtime. We have icebergs off the shores right now, even though it's about 25 degrees. We have very cold water, which meets from the Labrador Current, which meets the very warm water from the Gulf Stream, which we very kindly direct over to you in Northern Europe. So anyhow, we get a lot of fog because of that, and a lot of interesting conditions. Lots of rain, in which you're not at all. It is not at all unusual to you, I guess. Fog, wind, lots of cold temperatures in the winters, and so on. But, next slide, Kevin, please. So within the Marine Institute, we have three schools. The School of Maritime Studies, which does training for nautical science, as Kevin was saying, for NMCI, marine engineering. We have naval architecture. We have a bunch of industrial response type courses. So we do a lot of firefighter training for terrestrial as well as offshore cases. We have a burgeoning offshore industry, for better or for worse, where far as the climate is concerned. And we do all the training, or a lot of the training, for the safety and survival marine emergency duties for the offshore sector as well. We have, as I said, short-term training courses to bachelor's, diploma programs, bachelor's programs, master's, and PhD within that school. In addition to the School of Maritime Studies, we have the School of Fisheries, as well as the School of Ocean Technology, which looks at things like the design and operation and use of underwater and surface vessels, autonomous vessels, ocean mapping, and so on. And then in the School of Fisheries, again, we have things like aquaculture, ecosystems research, as well as water quality and coastal zone management work. Next, Kevin, please. Within my own area, so I sit within the School of Maritime Studies, within the Marine Institute, within Memorial University. My research tends to focus on emergency response activities. So I try to summarize it in the, many of you, or some of you may have heard of the acronym ESCAPE, Evacuation and Rescue. You may not have, but you may have. I like to put my own spin on this, because if you're in the middle of an emergency situation, you have to be able to evacuate. Once you've evacuated the ship, you have to be able to survive until you've been rescued. So it's kind of a continuum. Without looking at every individual part, then you're missing something. And so the research that I've done over the past 20 plus years has focused on each of these three phases of the process. So evacuation behavior for civilians as well as naval personnel, abandonment from ships, and then looking at sea survival in the Arctic, and then rescue processes, but also modeling of rescue activities and the use of emergency beacons, and how that varies depending on where you are on the globe, as well as what conditions you're experiencing. Some of my colleagues as well are looking at things like seafarer fatigue and training effectiveness of virtual reality, as well as motor learning, and we have a Department of Maritime Simulation.
Very good. Thanks, Rob.
Next, Kevin.
Yeah, so I'm going to take over again. So that was the kind of background as to, Halpin Research Centre, National Maritime College, and Marine Institute in Memorial. Rob and I thought that it might be just nice to share with you a little bit of our own sort of personal connections, transatlantic connections, and also connections with each other. So here's a little bit of a there and back again graphic. I apologise for the poor quality of the maps, but for me, I suppose Ireland-Canada research is both personal as well as professional. The blue arrows in the late 1800s represent my great-grandparents. They basically left Ireland and went to Canada, 2 to Ontario and 2 pet sets to British Columbia. And so my mum was born in Canada, grandfather from Hamilton, Ontario, grandmother from Vancouver. And lo and behold, you roll the tape forward, and my dad goes over to Canada to find work, meets my mum, I come along, and so in 1968 I get transplanted back to Cork. So I'm a double refugee in Kerry, actually. Very nice to be transplanted to Sneem, I have to say. So that's kind of just a little bit of an illustration of my own personal backstory. For me then, you know, there it is. My mum, Vancouver. I was on the left-hand side of my graphic, baptized in St. Patrick's Basilica in Montreal, and now happily living in Cork City, Ireland's real capital. Rob, you want to say about what your graphics show there?
Yeah, sure thing, Kevin. I was born in St. John's. I grew up in a small place called Happy Adventure, which was apparently named after a pirate ship. The place names around here, we locals, at least up to a certain age, don't think of some of them as being unusual, but Heart's Content, where the other end of the Valentia cable ends up, you know, it's a very pleasant name, and Heart's Delight and Cupids. And so growing up in a place called Happy Adventure, to me wasn't unusual until I started meeting people who thought it was. But in the meantime, the picture that I'm showing here is from St. John's, just in the Narrows, at the entrance to the harbour. Colourful houses, snow, not at all unusual. Myself, though, married to a woman whose ancestry is Irish, Michelle Brophy, and she's a flute maker and a flute player. We connected through traditional music, because there's a lot of connections in Newfoundland to Ireland, and I started playing the Uilleann pipes about 30 years ago, and I started learning how to make them about 2 years ago, and I'm still learning, and will be until the day I die, no doubt. And myself and my wife are also involved in a festival over here called Fiddle Seamus Craig, which was named after Seamus Craig, the fiddle player who came over from, he was born in Westmeath, I think, and he spent most of his life in Cork. And he came over here for 5 weeks and apparently stayed for 5 years. And when he went back, we've had a steady stream of musicians back and forth as a result. But when Seamus passed away 15 years ago, we started a festival in his honor, and we've had an even greater stream of musicians back and forth. So lots of connections to Ireland, and including in Kerry, but most of my friends are in Legal.
There you go. So look, there you go, just a little bit of a personal backstory. But look, so moving on then to, let's say, the research collaboration. What I'm showing here on this graphic is a bit of a timeline, which illustrates, I suppose, mostly, to be fair, NMCI's involvement in Arctic-related research and Canadian-linked research. I think it just want to sort of illustrate the focus that we have on North Atlantic and Arctic and sort of Pan-Arctic, including Canadian research. And so you can see here that on this graphic, Memorial and MTU are both IASST members, Institute for Sea Survival. I think I have that more or less right, Rob. Then NMCI and the Marine Institute, we both have simulator training for our seafarers, and that's a commonality which we feel we can exploit in future research. The MTU undertook a project looking at safety of small boats in Arctic waters, including in Canadian waters. That's the SMAX project. And then the first sort of milestone along this timeline is Rob. Rob Brown came to NMCI in 2017, which he'll talk about in a second. And then the ArcSAR project started in 2018. Along the way, then the Network of Arctic Researchers of Ireland was formed. ARCSAR had a major MRO, mass rescue exercise, in the August of 22, and we'll talk about that in more detail. And in general, MTU has been entering into these MOUs with Canadian colleges like Nova Scotia Community College, for example, where I was about 6 weeks ago, ever since about 2018. So on a kind of an institutional level, MTU has been deliberately trying to form and pin down and exploit these good, strong connections across the Atlantic. So, and finally then, a project, NACEMAP, has commenced just this year, looking at emergency preparedness and management with Dalhousie University. So that just gives you a quick flavour, I think, of the overall sort of arc time of the development of our interconnections. But Rob was going to just talk a little bit about the fact that he came to NMCI as a visiting scholar in 2017.
Yeah, so thanks, Kevin. In 2016, I submitted an application to the Ireland Canada University Foundation for the James Flaherty Research Scholarship for visiting researchers. I was lucky to receive the scholarship and came over for about 5 weeks, I think it was, and was working with various people within NMCI, but also out at CIT, the Nimbus Centre, to look at developing a network of excellence for improving safety on passenger ships. And so this was building on some existing, things like maritime operations and training and human factors between both our institutes, specifically through Halpin, and to develop some collaboration so that we could look at things like, for example, technology solutions for accounting for passengers in emergencies on ships, and to look at things like the effectiveness of training on evacuation outcomes.
And you'll be happy to know that the ICUF folks are here today, actually, Rob. So there you go.
Wow.
Nice shout out. Nice shout out to them.
It was a really worthwhile venture, I have to say. It was quite an experience.
There you go. Okay, so moving on then to the actual project example we want to talk about, and this is the project ARCSAR, the Arctic and North Atlantic Security and Emergency Preparedness Network. A bit of a mouthful, but the whole idea was to recognize the fact that Arctic shipping of all types, commercial, cruise and tourism, as well as, let's say, military, shipping is increasing in the Arctic very, very rapidly, particularly as the northeastern passage has become navigable almost all year, and as the northwestern passage is becoming more navigable, particularly in the summer months. So this gives rise to a lot of safety and security concerns and new worries and looking at capacity and rescue capabilities. So this project was created in an attempt to address some of these issues, and it involved partners from 12 countries, 20 partners worth about €3.5 million in total, but it involved particularly the NMCI and Memorial University. And this quote kind of captures the challenge, really. The cold climate, long distances, and lack of infrastructure makes dealing with disasters a challenging task in this region. And this, again, is one of those dramatic understatements where a challenging task means what, in reality, you're putting your own life on the line if you go and try and help somebody in distress in the Arctic.
Can I just add one quick thing there, if you can go back to the previous slide.
Go ahead.
This project was the third European framework project I've been involved in, but the first one in which we were able to receive some funding to support some of our travel to the different workshops and whatnot. But since this has happened, of course, Canada has joined Horizon Europe, and we are paying into the funding scheme, and so we are eligible, of course, as research partners for funding for future projects.
Yep. Okay, so quickly to go through the elements, I'm conscious that time is marching on. We have a very, very strong search and rescue organization presence in ARCSAR, 10 organizations. And these are basically rescue control centers, coast guards, and also people like the Norwegian Coastal Administration. We have 6 universities involved, including Rob and myself, and 4 industry partners involved, including a shipping representative organization and the Arctic Expedition Cruise Organization, which is the smaller expedition ships that get sent into Arctic and Antarctic to give people an experience, meaning they go out on zodiacs and onto islands and all the rest of that. We were examining trying to capture and identify emerging innovations, identify where RD&I needs were emerging, identify the barriers and gaps to uptake of innovation, identify best practices in terms of search and rescue in these northern waters, and then try to tackle the thorny question of standardization of practices, and also standardization maybe of the innovation needs that have been identified. The methodology was a very mixed range of methodologies, stakeholder consultations, innovation and knowledge exchanges, dissemination workshops, tabletop exercises, 3 very significant ones that got captured, reported with learning outcomes, and then finally the live MRO exercise, mass rescue operation exercise, which took place in Svalbard off of northern Norway, and finally then the ArcSAR conference itself. So, just a quick little geography lesson. This is where Svalbard is. That's where Cork is. That's where Memorial University is in the stars. And Svalbard is there, located halfway between Norway and the North Pole. It is at 79 degrees north latitude where we did our exercise. It's a long way north. The exercise itself involved a rescue helicopter. You can see it here, the AW101 out of Banak in northern Norway. To get to Svalbard, it needed to refuel on Bjorn Island, Bear Island, halfway between its base and Svalbard. So that gives you a sense of the distance that's involved. And you can see here an image from the rescue, from the exercise of somebody being winched onto the helicopter. The vessel we used was one of those expedition cruise vessels. Here it is, the Quest from a company called Polar Quest. And we simulated a fire in the engine room with a complete loss of power, requiring then the evacuation of all souls on board. The Norwegian Coast Guard vessel Barentshav was taking part as well. We'll see that in a second. This is a fire response, a fast response vessel with a fire crew, and they took the opportunity to do a firefighting training exercise on board the cruise ship. So we had smoke through the engine room and coming through the ship. We had these people coming on board with their breathing apparatus to do what they call smoke diving, entering the smoke-filled parts of the ship to simulate fighting the fire, and also to simulate doing a sweep through the vessel to make sure that nobody was missing and that all hands were accounted for. And here they are arriving in their fast response vessel. This is KV Barentshav, Kystvakt, Norwegian Coast Guard Kystvakt Barentshav. And you can see the ship with the smoke coming out of it in the background. And you can see we've launched the life raft, we've launched lifeboats. So it was a full test of all of the response capabilities. And here are the evacuees that have been rescued, brought by lifeboat and life raft to the deck of the KV Barentshav. And you can see the 2 presenters here identified. Unfortunately, Rob is facing away. You don't get to see him, but I looked up at the camera at just the right moment. So I'll let Rob now talk to this couple of slides, because this talks about what his role in the mass rescue exercise was. Rob?
That's good. Yeah. So a lot of the research I've done over the years, ships are expensive to charter, so I tend to do things on an opportunistic basis whenever I can. They only ever represent single point measurements for a given vessel, for a given population of people. But it's still worth doing because you learn something. You learn something about behavior of people. You learn something about how long it takes them to do certain things. And so, in this case, we mounted. Well, these are just 3 of the cameras that we mounted on board. One that was at the bow, one that was looking at the boarding area for the life raft, and another that was inside the lifeboat. Lifeboats, just as an example, are not things that people encounter every day. So being able to see what some of the struggles were, how long it takes people to maneuver themselves inside, and they have to deal with the low headroom situations and potentially slippery fiberglass surfaces and so on. So we were able to capture things like how long it takes to maneuver the helicopter into position, how long to lower the search and rescue technician, how long to prepare the casualties for lifting, how long to lift, and then things with the lifeboat, similar things with the lifeboat, how long it would take them to get the firefighting equipment on board, and so on and so forth.
Yep.
Right, I forgot I had 2 slides here. And then what do we do with that information? So the image on the right was meant to be a video, but I don't think that that actually came through. So I'll just talk about it. But one of the ways that we use such information is in modeling of behavior for evacuation. So for example, one of the requirements, one of the International Maritime Organization requirements is that passenger ships undergo an evacuation assessment to determine whether or not the design of the vessel is suitable for a swift evacuation. And so these are just a couple of examples of what those screens look like, and it allows you to examine a given design before you build the ship and then make adjustments if you have problems, rather than build the ship and find out you have problems after the fact. So data like this goes into helping to build these models.
Yeah, we're going to have to move on, but thanks, Rob. So the outcomes of ARCSAR then, very briefly, and I'm conscious that I need to wrap it up here. Essentially, the purpose of this entire project was to enhance search and rescue collaboration and learn from all of the exercises that we had done and apply the learning for improvements. We also were aiming to capture priorities that are required, that according to the industry and the practitioners, as opposed to what the academics thought, and to try to chart pathways to actually pursue those innovations for the benefit of search and rescue in the High North. I can certainly report we have been successful in all of this. For example, follow-on projects have taken place between some of the partners in ARCSAR subsequently, because they formed relationships and realized that they could work on things together. People from Norway, people from Iceland, people from Finland, people from Canada, okay? From the mass rescue operation, for example, the idea came to have a briefing video to show people what to expect if an evacuation is necessary, how to get onto the lifeboat, what you should do. A bit like a training video, but 2 purposes: educate people in an emergency, but also calm people down while they're waiting potentially to evacuate. So, you know, this is important. We did have a lot of learnings. I mean, just one little anecdote. As we evacuated the lifeboats, I noticed that one of the lifeboat operators, and this, bear in mind now, is a full rescue exercise. You might recall from the photograph on the deck of the ship, everybody was wearing their survival suits. It was all, you know, as realistic as possible. But one of the crew of the vessel who was supposed to drive the lifeboat turned up in his rubber dolly little runners and his tracksuit pants. Now, they were obviously his safety runners, you know, but yeah, so we discovered there were learnings about how seriously people may or may not be taking their rescue exercises that needed to be made. Anyway, future collaboration then, very last slide, apart from the thank you. Rob and I reckon that these areas here are just ripe for future collaborations. Anything to do with maritime safety and search and rescue, emergency management, also staff and student exchanges, the offshore renewable energy, ORE, but also, as mentioned earlier, the role of virtual reality and safety training. This is something that is, again, ripe for collaboration and further development. And there are potential funding sources out there. The ICUF is another one that's not even listed here. Lloyd's Register Foundation is a very interesting one that I'd like to just flag for people in case you haven't noticed it already. But also Horizon Europe coming to an end, and as Tig said earlier, the new Framework Programme 10 is in design, and hopefully that will be an increased amount of money for future research that we can collaborate with Canada on. So thank you very much for listening.
Folks, we're going to leave it there. Thank you very much, Kevin. Thanks to Tig and Niamh as well for your presentations. Again, what we're trying to do in this session was just give a flavour of the kind of collaborative work that can happen between the two countries. And we have further thoughts at the moment how we can now go on and perhaps enhance that and maybe look at funding mechanisms between the two countries, and that's something for the future. So with that, folks, we'll call it, and we'll see you all at the Royal in a short while. Thank you very much.